The center of the bright republic lay in Rittersburg. Though Bentheim surpassed the founding planet with its vibrant economy and liberal housing regulations, Rittersburg still remained the seat of government of the 100-planet state. Only inherited and distinguished families were allowed to live in its luxurious housing districts. In one such district, a row of modest villas rested alongside a placid river. In the backyard of one of those villas, a man reclined in a folding chair as he held a fishing pole in front of him. An empty bucket lay beside him, waiting for fishes to carry back home. An air car approached the guarded district. After the local defense systems checked its transponders and scanned the vehicle for any threats, it approved the vehicle's approach. The air car smoothly descended onto the landing pad next to the garage. The door opened to reveal the chiseled face of a man in uniform. The man marched briskly towards the back, as if already aware the occupant of the villa spent his time there. Father. Benjamin Lerksenson turned his gaze away from the bobber and beheld the new arrival. "RK. As carefree as ever I see. You've even taken the time to visit your dear old dad. How are the kids? Rambunctious as ever?" The uniformed man smiled a little as he loosened up. "I don't know how you managed to raise all 7 of us. I had a good wife, as do you, RK. No matter how much the service takes up your time, don't forget your family. You can do anything if the happiness of your wife and children are at stake. It's half the reason why I made it this far." RK nodded. "Speaking of which, I might have news of my elder brother. Wrinkle. I have no idea what he's embroiled himself with. He's always been the most reticent of you bunch. He loves his own son like a treasure, so why did he not come to me? Does he think I will treat him any less?" Pa. We've spent some time digging into Wrinkle's movements of the last year before he disappeared. There's a couple of times when he went off the grid. I suspect he went incognito in order to visit a conflict zone. Accounting for travel time, it should match the times he couldn't be traced. Benjamin grimaced at those words. Pirates. What has my boy done now? I didn't raise any of you to make dealings with the scum of the galaxy. The trail ends there, unfortunately. We don't possess enough information to infer which conflict zone Wrinkle frequented. We're analyzing all of the data devices he left behind, but he's been very disciplined with the trails he left behind, so we're not expecting much from those sources." Sighing, Benjamin closed his eyes as he leaned back on his chair. "Tell me about my grandson." There are some anomalies surrounding Vase that paint a suspicious picture. While he had been an unremarkable student in the Rittersburg University of Technology, he's performing above average in the month and a half that he's been active so far. It's as if he's given wings now that he's free. Benjamin smiled at the report. "I always expected Vase to catch up to his potential once he got over his inability to join our career path. I'm glad he finally found his way and embraced his role in the world. The financing still remains troublesome. Despite receiving a production license grant, Vase is unable to leverage this asset. If nothing unexpected happens, he will fail to meet his impending interest payment. Father. Will you give him a hand if he's come up short?" "No, not even at the very last moment. Wrinkle went through the trouble of procuring those loans, so we should see his plans through the end. I don't believe he has lost grip of his son even if he's indisposed." The river flowed gently along the stream. The sun shone brightly in the skies. A serene calm descended on the pair as the father kept fishing while the son organized his notes, sending over the relevant documents to his father's comm. "How's my grandson's work? He's not making more Fantasia variants, is he? He sold most of his 1-star virtual licenses to raise money. He's completely committed to mastering the Caesar Augustus. I bought his first mech, which is unmodified and tested in simulations. Was it up to par? Not really." RK shook his head in disapproval. If Vase produced a mech as shoddy as that in the real universe, he'd get chased away as soon as he tries to certify it at the association. In most of civilized human space, weapons such as mechs face stringent controls. Designers and manufacturers were only allowed to produce a mech if they owned the necessary licenses. When they finished producing a mech, they needed to be certified at the local mech trade association before it receives permission to be put on sale. The MTA was a transnational non-profit organization with branches in pretty much every human state. A colossus of the mech world, they regulated the civilian production and sale of mechs. Most states like the Bright Republic gave them official backing to do so in their territories because they were good at it and adhered to strict neutrality, never overstepping their bounds. In any case, if RK said that Vase product couldn't pass the MTA's strict certification, then he had a long road ahead of him. If Vase managed to shore up his weaknesses within a month, then he may be able to produce a mech that passed certification. But that required a lot of progress in a very short time. It comes down to time, huh? Benjamin mused. If the interest payment didn't hang over his head, Vase wouldn't be rushing with building a mech beyond his capabilities. It's convenient timing on the bank's part that they chose to hang such a term over his head without compromising a single step. RK shifted another set of documents over to Benjamin's comm. We've looked at the Cloudy Curtain Planetary Bank. The shareholders and employees are clean. Their books are also in order. The situation is just as it appears. The bank made a negative assessment of the viability of Vase business and just wants to claim the assets before they depreciate in value. Greedy bastards. I'm glad to hear they're nothing more than that, though. Saves me the trouble of another visit. According to the latest reports, Vase should be working on a new virtual mech right now. Do you want me to snap it up when he puts it on sale? Yes, and keep buying one of every variant he sells in that game of yours. I want you to track his progress in this way and give him a little push while he's at it. Don't buy any more, though. I don't want him to grow complacent. Understood, Dad. Anything else? Keep digging into the so-called Future Sons Technology Institution. Any organization with the clout to grant a production license of the Caesar Augustus shouldn't be an obscure player. We still can't make much progress on that front since they're based in the new Rubarth Empire. Their corporate laws are too opaque, deliberately so. Even if we use our sources, they won't be able to get anything. Benjamin spat to the side. RK, I don't need to know the shareholders or donors of the Institute. Just find out if a new Rubarthan or a foreigner taking advantage of the local laws is pulling the strings. That should be doable. I'll pass on your instructions. That should be enough on your plate for now. Leave me to my fishing. I'll go over the documents later and send you my thoughts in a day or two. Very well. Goodbye. As RK left the villa, Benjamin relaxed his eyes and smiled. He held a steady grip on his fishing pole. What kind of father abandons their son? The fish still didn't bite. Back on Cloudy Curtain, Vase released an exhaustive breath as he finished fabricating the Nero and Iron Spirit. The customized Caesar Augustus model still had its problem spots. However, with prior experience and the various modifications he made to mitigate a few bad spots, Vase encountered fewer risks during fabrication. The CA1 Nero, as he named it, still caused some difficulties, particularly with its armor plates which Vase hadn't modified. Finding a solution for the armor plates. The system offered a fallback. Its store sold various goods as long as Vase could afford the price. The cheapest alternative armor he could find in the shop cost at least 1,000 DP. Vase preferred not to buy them because the armor plating was several generations behind current standards. No one wanted to buy a CA1 variant with crappy armor. A big part what made the Caesar Augustus was its sword and shield, which were made out of the same expensive alloys as its armor. Cutting back on the armor meant not just lowering the CA1 defense, it also affected its offensive power. Luckily, it wasn't a problem he needed to concern himself with today. Vase put the Nero on sale once he ironed out the remaining kinks revealed by the last-minute tests. CA1 Nero. Base model, Caesar Augustus CA1. Purchase price, 950,000 gold minus 50%. Premium price, 60,000 bright credits. Charging 60,000 bright credits for the Nero was stretching the model's value. It only offered a marginal improvement in performance and a slight decrease in repair cost to any player interested in a Caesar Augustus model. Still, seeing how his previous mech got sold fairly quickly, Vase hoped his handcrafted Nero at least provided higher profits. He wanted to see some validation in the work he put in his models. Now that he finished the Nero, Vase ought to go back to the designer and create another variant. The problem was that Vase couldn't achieve a breakthrough in either improving the CA1 internals or replacing its armor. It came down to a lack of skills and resources. I can't afford the things I need. Vase sighed. Stupid system. Why did the pagoda thing reward me with a Caesar Augustus? He checked his status again in order to see how much catching up he still had to do. Status. Name, Vase Larkinson. Profession, novice mech designer. Specializations, none. Design points, 175. Attributes. Strength, 0.7. Dexterity, 0.7. Endurance, 0.6. Intelligence, 1.2. Creativity, 1. Concentration, 1. Neural aptitude, F. Skills. Assembly, novice minus 3D printer proficiency 1, assembler proficiency 1. Business, apprentice. Computer science, incompetent. Electrical engineering, novice. Mathematics, incompetent. Mechanics, Apprentice-Jury Rigging 1, Speed Tuning 1. Metallurgy, Apprentice. Physics, Novice-Lightweight Armor Optimization 1. Evaluation, an all-rounder in incompetence. I've acquired a decent amount of skills, but I've split my attention. Faze concluded as he saw how many low-level skills he currently possessed. I should either finish upgrading my electrical engineering or pick up medium-weight armor optimization 1. Raising my assembly sub-skills can wait for later once I start fabricating the real thing. Nothing changed after staring at his status for 10 solid minutes. Come on, system. I'm at the end of my rope. You haven't sent me a mission for a while now. Why not give me something to work with? Do you expect me to beg my grandpa for a loan or something? You have received a new mission. Please check the mission page for the details. Yes. Finally. Faze celebrated as he raised his fists with a grin. He then knelt on the ground, kowtowing towards the computer terminal. You are my god, system. He kept praising the system and its timely missions, completely forgetting the times he cursed the system for giving him missions with ridiculous demands. Mission Tutorial Part 4, X Factor. Difficulty, B rank. Prerequisites, completed Tutorial Part 3. Description. Some have characterized the profession of mech designer to the modern Prometheus. Are mechs purely machines, or are they something more? Please design a mech with a prominent X factor, ranking at least E or higher. Reward, 1 random 10-year medium armor production license, 200 tons of raw materials reserved for armor production. The rewards attracted Faze's attention. With a production license and a couple of containers of raw materials in the bag, Faze faced much less financial pressure in gathering the other materials required to fabricate his desired CA1 variant. This mission was essential to his future planning. Faze scratched his head. What the hell is X Factor? User, please research diligently and form your own answer to the riddle of X Factor. There are no wrong answers. Okay. Whatever. Faze had the feeling this problem was a lot bigger than anyone thought. From the esoteric manner in which the system described the X Factor, Faze felt a headache coming. What was all of this stupid talk about Prometheus and life? A mech was a weapon, a tool in which humanity used to wage war? In ancient history, when humans wanted to find a means in which to leverage a power greater than the human body could carry, they turned to horses. When cavalry added their weight to a charge, a normal foot soldier possessed few means to resist such force. With the rise of machines and the fuels that could power their insatiable appetites, warfare evolved. The deadliness of a single soldier remained limited, but could be multiplied if they operated tanks or airplanes. Though the uses of infantry never faded out even until this day, the primacy of machines over man in matters of warfare reigned supreme ever since. The introduction of mechs to the battlefield reinforced this principle. Melding the human form with the awesome power of machinery, the mechs provided humans with an excellent means to wage warfare on the ground. In the past 400 years since the first mech stomped all over a battalion of infantry and tanks, they remained the mainstay of human planetary warfare. Faze thought deeply and could not rack his brains in figuring out where this elusive X factor fitted in. It sounded a lot like the metaphysical bullshit that remained a popular topic of conversation among the dreaming students back in college. Man, why am I trying to figure this out myself? Faze shook his head. He sat down in front of his terminal. Let's see what the Galactic Net has to say about the X factor. The topic appeared to be obscure, but due to the sheer size of the Galactic Net, Faze found plenty of sources. Does the X factor exist? An interviewer asked the older gentleman across the seat. I do not know. The professor replied, shaking his head. In all my years of researching and developing the neural interface that allows pilots to control a mech like their own body, I have never come across a case where the mech provided measurable feedback to the pilot. The vague stories I've heard about the X factor all originates from the mouths of mech pilots, who aren't exactly the most authoritative voice in the area of mech design. So you're saying it might be a hoax? I try to keep an open mind, so I'm not inherently dismissing the theory. If someone is able to present me with stronger proof in the form of hard data, then I'd happily convert into a believer. But from what I have found out so far, the primary sources that speak about the X factor are mostly veteran pilots suffering from borderline PTSD. Age, combat stress and mental injuries all contribute to hallucinations that mislead them to think a mech is doing more than it should. We haven't conducted enough research on the impact of prolonged use of the neural interface to a pilot's psyche. Alright, so you remain skeptical. The interviewer nodded. Then Professor, let's change to a different tack. Do you believe that mechs are alive? The academic let out a contemptuous laugh. Let me ask you a question for once. Do you believe that mechs can think for themselves? At some level they do. All mechs possess computing power. Without processors to regulate a mech's operations, the pilot would be overwhelmed by irrelevant data. They act as the unconscious mind of a human's body. Since the infrastructure for an unconscious mind already exists, who's to say a mech can't also support a thinking mind? Just because they have the potential to do so doesn't mean that makes it so. In your eyes, there's a small gap between processing data and independent thought, but in my eyes they are separated by a chasm as wide as the distance between galaxies. We humans have worked on artificial intelligence for thousands of years, but for all our advances we have merely achieved a facsimile of sentience. Computers still can't independently dream or formulate their own desires without an actual human hand holding their train of thoughts. And never mind these complex desires. The most fundamental part of life is to reproduce, and I have never seen a mech become attracted to another. The interviewer laughed modestly. Certainly that's true. However, they don't have to lift a finger to reproduce themselves. Us humans are doing it for them by developing ever newer mechs. Perhaps we might live in a future someday where the number of mechs outnumber the humans piloting them? Are we raising our own doom? What do you think about that scenario? Accumulating war material is a natural state of affairs. No matter if you have 1 mech or 30 mechs, the pilot remains firmly in control. All the conspiracy theorists out there who believe that mechs are the remnants of an ancient machine civilization don't know what they are talking about. The first mechs have been developed using gradual advances in technology, all neatly documented and traceable without any alien influence. The interview went on for a few more minutes along the same vein. Vase had an inkling of what the X Factor was all about. I suppose most people think just like me, that mechs don't think for themselves. Vase mused as he scratched his head. But can I still say the same now that I have the system? Vase had gone through a lot since the first time he received the system. He interacted through its menu like it was a software program, but he also talked to it like the system was an individual. Certainly the system responded like a living being, even showing some emotion underneath its robotic exterior. The question was if displaying these emotions merely fell into a programmed response. Was the system programmed to follow instructions all this time? Goddammit, this is just like the chicken and egg problem. It just goes round and round. He learned to disregard problems he couldn't solve in a short time. Ordinarily he'd just ignore this issue, but since the mission forced him to figure out the X Factor, Vase had no choice but to continue racking his brains around the question of life. Man, let's find a more practical source of information. I need more hard facts and less wishy-washy talk. Vase thought as he went back to the starting page of the galactic net. Interviews provided by mech pilots tended to be more direct. Since they weren't scientists, they didn't fear ridicule if they said something wrong. Eric is my partner for life. A female pilot gushed as she watched over the technicians servicing her damaged mech. I can't count how many times he saved my life. The more I pilot him, the more I become him. I put half my mind in his body every time I connect with the neural interface. I don't believe Eric hasn't learned a thing or two from me in all these years. There were many moments I got into trouble in the battlefield. If Eric hadn't mentally nudged me here and there, I might have never escaped those deadly moments. If it was legal to marry a mech, I'd already be standing here wearing my bridal dress. I don't know why I'm still alive. A wounded mech pilot rasped as he beheld the stumps of his arms. I knew I was a goner as soon as 3 bastards popped out of nowhere. My mate died, his cockpit blown apart before he could dodge. Something just snapped then. He was my friend, the partner I always shared my patrols with. Even our mechs had been a pair ever since they rolled off the factory. I guess my mech felt the same because he fed his anger into me while I channeled my fury back into the frame. You know what happened next? We tore those bastards to shreds. A shaggy-haired prisoner of war sat down on a metal chair behind a metal table. He looked around the interrogation room with distaste. You want to know my secrets? You unfeeling murderers don't know the first thing about the mechs you're piloting. Have you ever rubbed your hands against them affectionately? Have you sat down next to their gigantic feet and tell them about the stars? Did you for one tiny moment stop murdering innocents long enough to treat your mechs like a person? I guess not. That's why I've been able to kill over 200 of you bastards with just me and my mech. Because I was never alone. I've chased after the oft-rumored X Factor for my entire life. An elderly executive stated as he sat behind an imposing desk in his office. I bought and piloted over 3,000 mechs. Bipedal, quadrupedal, humanoid, avian, reptilian, whatever the shape, you can be sure I piloted it at least once. I've also painstakingly tracked down over 100 damaged, scrapped or secondhand mechs piloted by some of the most famed aces in the galaxy. All of them were excellent machines, especially after I restored them to their glory. So did you manage to fulfill your life's ambition? The old man smiled wistfully. Perhaps. Perhaps not. I certainly think that the X Factor exists now more than ever. But is everyone fated for it? Perhaps us 3.5%ers are not the cream of the crop we believe to be. Maybe only 3.5% of the 3.5% of humanity possess the right aptitude to trigger the X Factor. But these so-called superpotentates cannot all be blessed. They need the right mech to unearth their full potential. But that's just a random idea I'm tossing out, don't take it too seriously. A mech is lifeless. It isn't born, it's created. It doesn't die, it gets destroyed. A famed new Rubarthan ace pilot said as he resolutely stood before his mech in a hangar. All of these myths about the silly X Factor are mistaken. I believe in the endless potential of the human heart. When one puts his body and soul to a single purpose, he can achieve 110% or even a 120% of his maximum potential. The mech is not the source, but the means in which we pilots can achieve miracles. I don't disrespect the pilots who believe in the X Factor, but they attribute too much of their success to their mechs and not enough to their humanity. Vase always believed mechs were machines. They were born for the purpose to be used, and if they fail to perform up to spec, then they'd be discarded as heartlessly as one would throw away a broken chair. You might feel some affection for sitting on it for years on end, but in the end it was just a piece of furniture. But now he came across plenty of hearsay that suggested that mechs were more than unfeeling tools. They had the capacity to think, to feel emotions, to make decisions on their own, even if only faintly. Was this what the system referred to as the X Factor? Though skeptics provided plenty of viable alternatives, Vase leaned more in favor to the idea that mechs could possess life. Still, his beliefs changed nothing by itself. His mission wasn't to uncover the mystery behind the X Factor. Instead, he had to design a mech that incorporated the vaguely defined X Factor. How the hell was he supposed to bring life to a mech? Then he remembered that he might have already touched the threshold. He activated the system and switched to his old designs. He called up the Seraphim's evaluation. Design evaluation, Fantasia 2R Seraphim. Variant name, Fantasia 2R Seraphim. Base model, Fantasia 2R. Original manufacturer, Kezia Armaments. Weight classification, light. Recommended role, aerial marksman. Armor, D. Carrying capacity, F. Aesthetics, A. Endurance, D-. Energy efficiency, D-. Flexibility, C+. Firepower, C. Integrity, F+. Mobility, A-. Spotting, B. X Factor, F. Deviance, 44%. Performance improvement, 17%. Overall evaluation, the Fantasia 2R Seraphim features a superior aerial performance at a horrible cost. Its performance in close-range combat has been sacrificed for powerful long-ranged firepower. The mech is able to outperform its opponents as long as it has energy to spare, which isn't much. The Seraphim further shines out due to its attractive appeal. The description commented on the Seraphim's fundamental attributes. Nothing in it hinted at anything metaphysical, yet the system still gave him an F in X Factor. Vase almost couldn't believe it. The Seraphim, a kludgy variant of the 400-year-old Fantasia model, carried the potential to ignite a mech pilot's performance beyond its pinnacle. What makes the Seraphim so special? The R2E, Phantasm and Nomad are also based off the Fantasia, but why don't they have a whiff of X Factor? The puzzled nagged at Vase. He felt as if he had the pieces in front of him, but he just couldn't make it fit. He doubted spending more time in the galactic net would help. A lot of the people who researched it never experienced the X Factor for themselves. Maybe he should find someone closer. He considered calling Melinda, but he didn't want to distract her from her work. Serving in the Bentheim Planetary Guard was a great honor for a pilot as young as her. Vase already crossed the limit when he asked her to pass over information on the Caesar Augustus. I don't need to find a real pilot. Iron Spirit is supposed to simulate reality accurately. Can it also simulate the X Factor? It was an interesting question that Vase had no way of answering, but he was willing to bet the answer was favorable. He went to his store page and checked his sales log. Only 5 players bought the Seraphim. 4 of those only piloted the mech occasionally, with mixed results. Only 1 player piloted the Seraphim frequently and with considerable prowess. A bronze leaguer with the nickname The Event Snake. Chapter 17. Joshua drained the energy drink down his throat and tossed the can to the ground. A cleaning bot appeared out of nowhere to take the garbage away. Mom. I'm home. An elegant woman entered the foyer whilst carrying a babbling toddler. She approached the teenager and gave him a kiss on his forehead. Joshy baby. How was school? I'm not a kid anymore, Mom. Joshua whined as he avoided his mother's embrace. He ran up the stairs to his room. And I did fine in school. My mech trainer complimented me again today. That's good news. The higher your performance, the higher your rank when you become a reservist. Just don't join the mech corps. I'm not going to, Mom. Joshua said as he threw his bag on his bed. I'm going to play with the simulator again, okay? Don't forget about dinner again. Yes, Mom. After fending off his nagging mother, Joshua left his room and went downstairs. He took 2 flights down and entered the basement. Situated in a cold and isolated room was his personal mech simulator pod for Iron Spirit. An expensive piece of machinery, it outperformed the rental pods at the game center. His parents even forked out the money to dig a secure set of cables to the nearest galactic net node in order to ensure his bandwidth never conked out. All of this turned Joshua's pod into the best performing unit on Cloudy Curtain. As Joshua entered the pod and let it close around him, he leaned his head back into the headdress that served as the neural interface. It hummed as it came to life, connecting Joshua's brain signals to the programs executed by the pod. The world changed. The cool steel walls of the simulator pod made way for a vibrant world. Many young men and women around his age walked through the digital streets of the starting area. Some sat next to fountains, watching the live streams of popular players that chose to broadcast in public. Others entered one of the many stores in order to shop for a new outfit. As for Joshua, he pulled up his friends list and tapped at one of the names to begin a dialogue. Yo Tops. Hey a snake. Triceratops SSS greeted as his face appeared at the corner of Joshua's view. Up for another bout of arena. Joshua shook his head. I don't feel like it. The 1v1s and 2v2s have been getting kind of stale for me lately. I'm ready for something different. Oh. Triceratops SSS mulled as he switched to matchmaking. You wanna play Capture the Flag or Base Conquest? Let's do Capture the Flag. It's 5v5 so I feel my skill still matters in that game mode. The two paired up and entered matchmaking for Capture the Flag as a duo. They first received 3 random players to fill up their 5-man team. Hey fellas. Triceratops SSS greeted his new teammates. Me and Snake here are pairing up as light mechs. Medium missile platform. The third player spoke, his tone conveying his distaste in further interaction. Okay. What about the rest? Heavy Knight. Just plant me next to our flag and I'll make sure anyone who takes it will be dead. The fourth player boasted. Defending the flag was the most traditional role in Capture the Flag and perfect for a heavy mech. Got any guns on your knight? Nope. But I'm faster than other knights. Great. Triceratops SSS sighed. At least you can chase the enemy if someone manages to steal the flag from underneath us. So what about the last guy? I'm a girl, thank you. The young woman emphasized with a sneer. You just get out of my way. If you must know, I'm piloting a Genesis 18. The medium spider mech. So you do have more than 3 brain cells. Congratulations, doofus. Haha. Triceratops SSS deadpan. Well, our team's a little light on weight, but we're very mobile. Let's do a 4-to-1. 3-2. The missileer interjected. My mech's a glass cannon. I'm best at supporting the heavy knight and providing long-range missile support. I'm attacking from the rear. The spider girl said. I work best if I can sneak up to them alone, so don't you dare follow me. Triceratops SSS sighed again. Joshua, Orthes Event Snake consoled him in a private chat. Don't bother too much. Getting your teammates work together like we learned at school doesn't always work. A lot of players just want to blow off steam. God, I hope they make an effort then. My win rate for Capture the Flag is already in the dump due to getting teamed up with egoistic morons. The matchmaking system released a bell, signifying a successful search of an opposing team. The screen changed into a small lobby where their team could inspect the enemy's loadout while the random battlefield loaded in the background. This event Snake analyzed the enemy's team composition and felt a headache forming. The enemy team has a 3-person pre-made. They're all kitted with the same heavy mechs. He didn't recognize the variants, but they looked a lot like the strikers he fought the other day. One of them carries a bunch of close-ranged heat projectors. The other transformed his arms into medium-ranged ballistic cannons. The last guy appears to be their long-ranged marksman with his jumbo-size laser rival. It was a composition that lacked mobility but possessed power in spades. Relying on their tough armor and plentiful energy reserves, they could bulldoze anything in their way. The two randoms pulled in their team adjusted to the trio and came with their light mechs. Triceratops SSS noted. One aerial scout and one saboteur. That's plenty of mobility for them to plug their gaps. Thesavent Snake shook his head. Not really. You can be sure the three meatheads will stick together. We're either going to face a heavy push or a full-on defense. If they keep Turtle up in their base, I can bombard them with impunity behind a hill. The missileer said curtly. And if their team attacks, their flag will only be defended by two lights. The map finished loading, causing everyone to appear in a small open fort. A lengthy flagpole stuck out from the middle of the parade ground. All right, let's move. The spider mech girl crawled over the walls with her 8 limbs and disappeared from their view. The missileer took off in the other direction while the heavy knight planted its feet right next to the flag. Triceratops SSS followed Thesavent Snake on the ground as he flew up in the air. The first thing we need to do is find the 3 heavies and figure out what they're up to. Thesavent Snake spoke to his fellow teammates. Me and Tops will scout the enemy first. As a flyer, Snake Seraphim traversed the forest prairie environment with effortless grace. Top's Phantasm could only slink through the trees as third as fast. However, the ground mech was able to minimize its emissions to stay hidden while the flyer radiated heat and also color as its iconic cloud generator spewed clouds of vapor. Thesavent Snake didn't care if he got spotted by the enemy first. Even as his Seraphim extended its sensor hair in the flowing wind, he was pretty much waiting to get shot at. After piloting the Seraphim for many hours, he grew confident in his ability to dodge. Thesavent Snake got distracted as a strange notification popped up. Someone is spectating me. That's strange. Oh well, as long as he isn't feeding information to my opponents, I don't care. A barrage of laser fire shot from a cloud. Some of the beams scorched Thesavent Snake's armor, thankfully not damaging anything essential. I'm under fire by their air scout. Engaging. Tops, keep searching for their heavies, don't let this distraction fool you. Triceratops SSS nodded as his Phantasm kept combing the surrounding area. Roger that, pal. My ground-to-air missiles are ready to fire. The missileer interrupted. Maintain contact and feed your target lock to me. No, stay out of this fight. I can handle this fellow myself. Don't reveal your position. The Seraphim flared its wings and juked side to side as it fired back with its light DMR. The jerky lateral movements made it hard to hit by the enemy lightweight, but the long-range rifle also scored very little hits. That was okay, because Snake increased his speed and approached with fury. His heart pumped faster and his brain went into a heightened state. His Seraphim holstered the rifle on his back, which was difficult with the wings in the way, and retrieved a pair of heated knives. Like the fangs of a predator, he wielded them in a reserve grip and rocketed in a charging attack towards the enemy flyer. The enemy mech panicked a bit as it had been loaded for long to medium range harassment. The pilot felt much less confident in melee than the enemy, so he flew back and engaged his mech's thrusters in order to escape the approaching rainbow mech. Death. Thesavent Snake yelled as he exerted his Seraphim to the utmost, managing to slowly close the distance at the cost of overheating his mech's wings. I can take it. My mech is meant to rule the skies. The enemy mech dove downwards in order to gain more speed and perhaps seek help from its allies on the ground. However, the Seraphim anticipated the move and accelerated just a split second earlier. The brilliant decision allowed it to close the distance just enough for Snake to feel the opposing mech's heat. You're mine now. The light mech gave up escape and flipped in the air, presenting its medium-powered laser rifle at him. The Seraphim crossed its arms just as the lasers pelted its form, causing a lot more spots to blacken and melt away. The enemy mech evidently overheated its rifle, sacrificing its endurance for a massive boost in firepower. It's too late. Snake yelled as he made his Seraphim spin. The rotation allowed it to dodge the last set of lasers while adding momentum to its poised and outstretched knives. The light mech extended its rifle in desperation, blocking with its bulk. One heated knife snapped right through its body, shearing the weapon into slag. The other knife passed around the weapon and scored a deep blow in the shoulder, practically crippling the mech's left arm. The Seraphim finished delivering its attacks, leaving it open for the light mech's kick. The feeble attack hardly damaged the Seraphim, but it successfully pushed it away, leaving the half-crippled mech enough space to continue to fall. Instead of chasing after its prey, the Seraphim holstered its knives and brought its rival back to its arms. With a calm and steady aim, the Seraphim fired a constant stream of energy bolts. The first bolts went wide, but as the light mech failed to adjust in time, the next bolts hit its wings. The damage was light, but it disrupted the operation of its wings. The light mech posed an easier target now that its speed reduced. The subsequent energy bolt shredded the rest of the light mech's wings, leaving it incapable of correcting its fall. Their aerial scout is doomed. The event Snake stated as he watched the smoking mech crash into the ground and explode. What's the situation down on the ground? Their saboteur is good. The spider mech girl responded. He got 2 of my legs, but he hasn't come out unscathed. Don't bother me. Let me focus on the duel. Their heavies are attacking our base. I'm having a hard time keeping them off our flag. The heavy knight gasped. Mr. Missile Fan is helping, but I really need more help. Triceratops SSS also filled in his status. I've taken their flag since Spider Mech is doing a good job keeping their remaining light mech occupied. I can either help her out or go back to base. I won't be able to deliver the flag with the heavy boys around. Return to base. We need to destroy at least 2 out of 3 of those heavies in order to give you an opening to deliver the flag. Okay, boss. The Seraphim flew back to base while the flag-carrying Phantasm ran across the terrain while holding a large flag. The event Snake assessed his mech's damage and energy reserves and concluded it could withstand one more all-in assault. Damn it. They got my sword arm. I'm only left with my shield now. Hang on, I'm coming. The event Snake responded as he broke through the clouds and flew over his team's base. His sensors rapidly detected the glowing hot forms of the enemy trio. The close-ranged heat-projecting enemy pinned down the heavy knight while slowly melting its armor. The medium-ranged ballistic gunner had succeeded in blowing off the heavy knight's sword arm and now went to work on its legs. As for the long-range marksman, it had already circled round the sides to suppress their missileer. To his credit, the missileer used its superior mobility to stay one step ahead of the enemy marksman, taking advantage of the surrounding hills to keep out of its line of sight. All the while, it fired sporadic volleys of arcing missiles onto the other 2 heavy mechs with the help of the telemetry the heavy knight sent back. The missiles hadn't inflicted any critical damage to the 2 mechs, but the frequent explosions degraded their sensors and stripped much of their top-facing armor. The 2 bruisers were so engrossed in bullying the heavy knight that the Seraphim was practically able to position itself at their rear. It then dived down in a descending, heart-stopping powered fall. The event Snake overcharged his DMR, causing its chamber to accumulate so much energy that smoke started to escape. He even overloaded his rear side cloud generator so that it created a vast rainbow wake that approached the unsuspecting 2 mechs like the front of a tsunami. The heavy knight's facing allowed it to see the oncoming attack, and fell slack for a second, which proved to be a fatal mistake as a cannon shell ripped apart its right leg, causing the mech to lose its balance. The heat-projecting mech pounced on the vulnerability while the cannoneer reloaded its shells with the confidence his target was already dead. Just as it was in the middle of swapping its magazine, the cannoneer somehow felt an invisible pressure form from its rear. After switching to the rear sensor feeds, it suddenly noticed a gigantic attack coming from the air. Death. The event Snake bellowed as he aimed and fired a humongous energy bolt at the flat-footed cannon mech. The bolt zapped through the air like a hot knife through butter. The huge ball of energy splashed against the mech's rifle, coincidentally also damaging its magazine, causing it to explode in a devastating ripple. The bolt fell apart with most of its energy dispersing in the air, but some of the damage landed on the mech's front, ruining its surface internals. The event Snake had already decoupled and tossed aside his slagged rifle. With his twin-heated knives he struck the damaged and bleeding mech in its head and upper torso. He landed with so much momentum behind him that the knives tore through the remnants of the heavy mech's armor and ruined several of its critical systems, the most important of which was the power reactor embedded near the heart area. The cannoneer, now cut off from power, shut itself off. Snake Seraphim landed its delicate legs against the disabled mech's chest and bent its knees to mitigate its falling momentum. That left it open to the remaining heavy mech. The heat projector ignored the heavy knight that had been slagged into a molten statue, and ran back to avenge his comrade. With his Seraphim already running hot like an oven, even a glancing hit by the wide-area heat projectors could cause Snake to be boiled alive in his own mech. Acutely aware of the impending crisis, the event Snake acted in desperation. In a feat of exemplary control, the Seraphim spread its legs like a stripper and leveraged its grip on the embedded knives to spin around the unpowered mech's torso. The air flashed with white-hot heat and the projectors fired. The cannon mech's ruined armor suffered a catastrophic amount of damage while some of its internals even caught fire. The Seraphim's exposed legs also melted into a half-puddle shape, rendering them incapable of supporting the light mech's weight. However, the event snake managed to preserve his mech's waist and upper body. The seraphim leaned over, using the burning cannoneer as a shield, and did something stupid. It threw its knives at its opponent. The heat-projecting mech got startled and hastily tried to angle its armor against the incoming projectiles, only for them to fall short and land on the ground. The heat projector grew enraged, and stomped over with his lumbering mech while firing its heat weapon without regard. The event snake continued to make his mech hug the increasingly hotter cannon mech, hoping desperately that it would last. Tops. Got it. The heat projector inadvertently walked away from the center. This left the waiting Triceratops SSS a narrow window of approach. His phantasm swiftly but quietly climbed over the walls of their fort and made a beeline to the center where his own team's flag also rested. Noticing his mistake, the heat projector's pilot commanded his mech to turn its torso. With his pair of heat projectors poised to fire, the phantasm was bound to suffer greatly. That was until the event snake managed to pry off his battered and half-molten seraphim away from its shield. With a disabled pair of legs, the seraphim nevertheless crawled forward with all the strength its feeble arms could muster. It approached underneath the distracted heavy mech and reached out to grab on the heat projectors. The seraphim succeeded in spoiling one of the heat projector's aim. It unleashed much of its molten fury harmlessly against the ground. The other heat projector succeeded in hitting the phantasm. However, the phantasm suffered no damage beforehand, and with only one projector achieving a hit, the phantasm maintained its ability to move. With a limping run, Triceratops SSS succeeded in planting the enemy's flag right next to their team's unconquered banner. Yes. Woo. You interrupted my duel. While his teammates cheered and grumbled, the event snake sank back in his cockpit with a satisfied expression. He could feel the victory invigorating him even as he felt as if the excessive heat had cooked him into a crispy state. We won. The event snake smiled as he let out a warm and deep breath. I'm getting better at this, though my seraphim won't be happy I trashed it again. Then he remembered someone had spectated him throughout the entire match. The event snake opened his personal page and switched to his stream. He read out the name of his only spectator. Chasing Clouds. That sounds familiar. Watching the event snake's replays impressed FaZe. The mech pilot's flamboyant piloting of his seraphim showed a remarkable mastery of its capabilities. The seraphim domineeringly claimed the skies, fighting particularly well against other flyers, and launched aggressive attacks against opponents on the ground. Though FaZe knew little of mech piloting, he still recognized the event snake's remarkable skill. His aggressive play style and continuous risk-taking hit a keen sense of timing. If this snake wasn't at the threshold of promoting to silver, he was absolutely in the upper tier of Bronze League. When FaZe noted that the event snake had come online and entered matchmaking, he chose to spectate his match. What he saw of the young pilot's performance reaffirmed his judgment. Snake piloted the seraphim in ways even FaZe hadn't imagined. But does he have the X factor? Good piloting didn't necessarily mean one has the X factor. Disregarding the phenomenon's vague definition, the X factor might not even work in a virtual reality environment. Perhaps the event snake was only a good pilot, and nothing more. Still, FaZe believed it would be beneficial to his understanding of his mechs if he had a talk with the pilot. When FaZe initiated a call, the mech pilot answered immediately. Hello. I saw you spectating my last match. Who are you? I'm the mech designer who created the Seraphim variant you're piloting. Wow. The pilot gasped. No wonder I found your nickname familiar. So you're the famous Fantasia customizer. I'm researching a new project, and I need some feedback from the people who pilot my older work. Can you spare me a moment of your time? Yes. FaZe was taken aback at this event snake's enthusiasm. This was the first time since he became a mech designer that someone afforded him respect. Hey, calm down kid. I just want your thoughts on some stuff, so don't be too stiff. FaZe told the player, hoping he wouldn't be paralyzed into silence. Let me ask you my first question. Your records show that you've been piloting the Seraphim ever since you bought it. What makes you stick with the model? I think you must have realized by now that it isn't the best mech in its weight class. This event snake paused as he tried to formulate his words. I can't describe it. I never thought about replacing my Seraphim. I love it far too much to get rid of it. The mechs that I've piloted before are all good machines, but they don't fit my style. What do you mean when you use the word style? FaZe asked, wondering if it had anything to do with the X factor. My playstyle. My way of fighting. Something like that. The Seraphim just clicks with me in a way no other flyer could. It's like we're part of the same brainwave. I can feel my passion engulfing the entire mech when I'm deeply engaged in a fight. No other mech can make me feel this good. Alright. Let me ask you something else. Have you ever experienced a moment where your mech gave you a push? For example, did the mech warn you of danger while you were unaware of it? Were there moments when you thought doing something was impossible, but you still managed to achieve it because your mech gave you a helping hand? The event snake fell into silence. I don't recall any moments like that. I'm always in full control of my mech. What I'm pretty sure of is I feel more at ease with the Seraphim. It's easier to play at my best when I'm piloting the Seraphim than with any other mech. I've even bought your Phantasm and Nomad models, but I never could get quite as comfortable when I play with them. Maybe it's the lack of wings. I've fallen in love with flying. Vase asked the event snake some other questions. What distinguished a good pilot and a great one? Are mechs better when they are smaller or larger? Does he believe in metaphysics? The young pilot's answer revealed no surprises. The boy wasn't aware of the X factor, nor did he seek to pursue anything magical. Vase formed an image of the young potentate. Young, wealthy and well-trained, his view of the mech world had been colored by the many teachings of his tutors. It was therefore no surprise that they avoided telling him about the X factor. A young man like him had no business chasing after a fantasy. I have one last question. Vase wrapped up the interview. Try to take a moment before you answer this. Do you believe your mech is alive? I don't know. The event snake replied with a confused expression. He scratched his head, trying to recall the times when he piloted the Seraphim. I'm not delusional. Of course it's not alive. The Seraphim's a great mech, but it doesn't have an AI as far as I know. What I can say is that piloting my Seraphim makes me feel more alive than anything else. Alright. Thank you for taking the time to tell me about your experiences. Goodbye. I hope I helped. You certainly did, don't worry about it. Can I ask you something before you go? Are you going to put more one-star mechs on the market? Vase shook his head. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I don't plan to do so. I've sold most of my one-star licenses, so I can't construct any new one-star mechs. My hands are kind of full trying to start up my real universe mech business. Oh, so you're a real mech designer? No wonder. That's not to say I still don't have a use for Iron Spirit. Vase responded carefully, naturally not mentioning that earning massive DP was his main reason for sticking around. Once I earn some revenue, I'm transitioning to 2-star mechs. The profit margin is better in that tier. He would also have an easier time to reach beyond his limited customer base in Cloudy Curtain. In a few months, he'd hopefully gain enough skills to produce a competitive design. After shutting down the game, Vase stood up and stretched his limbs, mentally re-examining the interview. The event snake spoke with a peculiar accent that reminded him of the officials working in the capital of Cloudy Curtain. Despite his good upbringing, the young potentate described his piloting in the same vague way as the veterans did when describing their incredible feats that others thought involved the X factor. In other words, the interview provided inconclusive results. Vase hadn't come much closer to understanding the elusive X factor. Was it some kind of energy that hid inside a mech? Was it some evolutionary catalyst that manifested in only a couple of pilots? There's one thing all interviews about the X factor have in common. Love. Affection. Grief. Vengeance. Whatever was the case, most of the extraordinary performances mentioned in the Galactic Net were backed by strong and unrestrained emotions. It seemed unrelated. What do emotions have to do with the performance of a mech? That's like suggesting that an air car can fly faster if the driver felt happy or angry. It made no sense. But an air car doesn't have a neural interface. Vase remarked as he thought he found a clue. The neural interface allows mech pilots to receive sensory input from the mech, allowing them to treat the frame like it's their own body. Any decision a mech pilot makes is sent as output through the same interface, thus causing the mech to move according to its commands. Vase went back to his terminal and sought out a few articles about the neural interface. The neural interface was a highly restricted and highly controlled piece of hardware. Under no circumstances did any manufacturer allow the neural interface to leak out unnecessary signals. Excessive sensory input would overload a pilot's brains, while excessive movement output would cause the mech to lose control. The neural interface was strictly programmed to detect and block unauthorized signals, and technicians checked them frequently if they weren't tampered with. Pretty much every mech designer and technician trusted the neural interface to work as advertised. If thousands of industry insiders are sure there's nothing fishy with the neural interface, then it's not the source of the X factor. Emotions also elicit brain signals, and since those were different from the sensory and movement signals, they were explicitly blocked by the neural interface. But what if those signals are inseparable? Could emotions be conveyed through the same signals, therefore making it impossible for the neural interface to filter them out? For example, if a mech held a sword over a fallen enemy, did its pilot's desire to kill his opponent get blended in with the same signal that commanded the mech to thrust down its sword? If a mech spotted missiles flying in its direction, did an emotion like fear accompany its sensor signals of the incoming threat? Unfortunately, Vase had no background in the neural sciences. Everything he learned about the neural interface in college was how to install it and how to maintain it. A designer had no need to know how the gadget worked in order to use it in their designs. This left Vase unable to answer this question. I don't think all those other people who have hunted down the X Factor are that stupid. If someone like me can think of it, I'm sure they exhausted themselves to death trying to see if the neural interface was capable of doing more. In the end, Vase was stuck again. With no solid theory on how to achieve the X Factor, Vase had no starting point in designing a mech that incorporated it. With the huge interest payment looming over him, time began to run out for him. He could not waste the remaining days on a fruitless quest. Lucky chose this time to barge inside. With a nonchalant walk, the mechanical cat dropped the shiny blue sapphire before Vase's feet. It then nuzzled his legs with its slim but lively body. Another gem, I see. At least you didn't bury it in the backyard again. Vase picked up the sparkling blue gem and inspected it briefly before storing it in a small safe. Good job, buddy. Vase took a break. He picked up his gem cat and sank down on a sofa. He scratched the cat's metallic hide, not really sure if the cat even felt his fingers, but sure acting like it did. Lucky closed its eyes as it lay down comfortably on Vase's lap. As he looked at Lucky, a strange thought inserted in his head. Are you alive? The cat kept purring as if he didn't understand the question. But Vase knew the gem cat was smarter than he looked. It possessed an AI way more sophisticated than the thoughts of an average household cat. What is life? The age-old question of life engendered a lot of controversy over the years. Many scientists mentioned that life had the ability to learn, adapt, and reproduce. These clinical definitions of life try to encompass all manner of life, including even the tiniest bacteria. That made the definition far too broad to be of use in this situation. Instead, Vase wondered if Lucky could be called a living being. Sure, he probably couldn't mate with another mechanical cat, but Lucky was no different from any other pet. Whether Lucky's responses formed spontaneously or through a large script of possible responses, it didn't matter. Humans worked in the same way if one pulled up their microscopes and sunk deeper into a person's cells and DNA. I don't care what the scientists and experts say. Since you're capable of expressing your emotions, you're alive in my book. Vase was also pretty certain the key to unlocking the X Factor lay in emotions. If Lucky could express emotions like love, hate, fear, and disgust, why not a mech? Certainly, a mech didn't possess the programming to ferment such redundant thoughts in the eyes of scientists. But what if a mech bypassed the neural blockade? It could borrow the pilot's complex neural system to form its own emotions. Since the mech neurally connected to its pilot's brain, its emotions mirrored the pilot's own feelings. A mech's anger would neatly mirror its pilot's own hostility towards an opponent. This would only enhance a pilot's current mood and not display anything abnormal in the neural interface. I'm kind of reaching out there. How can a novice designer like me get it right while countless of experts missed this gap? At this point, Vase stopped caring about the opinions of others. He kept it simple. Lucky is alive. The system is also a living being. If these two entities are capable of life, then I believe that mechs can also live. If he presented these words to one of the researchers who studied the X Factor for decades, he'd be laughed and ridiculed at. It was a stupid-sounding argument that relied entirely on subjective anecdotal experience. But when he looked down and stroked Lucky's back, he felt no regrets. I can't phrase it in any better way, but my faulty logic doesn't matter. My belief is enough. My heart tells me I'm looking in the right direction, and that's good enough. Now, Vase had finally obtained a somewhat coherent picture of the relation between life and the X Factor. He felt as if a weight had disappeared. Now I have to put theory into practice. Vase was ready to design a new mech. One that hopefully unlocked the X Factor. Vase revisited the CA-1 and Nero. He was never proud of the mech, even if he learned a lot about the Caesar Augustus when working on it. The small solutions he implemented in the Nero only helped him fabricate a less horrible Caesar Augustus. In that regard, he succeeded modestly. When Vase checked his sales again, he saw that the Nero had already been sold once for a whole 60,000 credits. At least I don't have to worry about paying for the raw materials of my next model. The Nero always felt like a half-finished job to Faze. Now that he came back with a lot of new ideas, he wanted to revisit its design and see whether he could transform it into a mech that enables pilots to reach the X Factor. Faze opened up the mech designer system and switched to the designer page. The designer stored all of his old designs, so he pulled up the Nero effortlessly. When he modified the Ka-1's design, he made changes based revolving around reducing its cost and increasing its efficiency. He treated the Caesar Augustus as a robot and rearranged its internals without any regards to its presumably non-existent feelings. Faze wasn't sure working like that was the right approach. In his beliefs about the X Factor, emotions played an important role. While he still wasn't certain how to engender these emotions in a giant machine, he had some guesses he could try. First, he theorized a mech designer's emotions and intentions played an enabling role. In other words, his own feelings bled over into the design and fabrication of a new mech. The clues to this idea came from remembering the circumstances of designing the Seraphim. Ice-cold designers who barely put any passion in their designs could never spark a semblance of life in these mechs. When Faze worked on the Phantasm, Nomad and Nero, he constantly tried to maximize his gains while minimizing his losses. Though he was upbeat, he didn't put in an excessive amount of passion in his work. Despite being overburdened with toys, the Seraphim had been designed in a fit of passion. Faze vaguely remembered the emotions he experienced back then. He became elated at his first sale, and the completion of his second-ever tutorial missions. He received a windfall of resources and also got drunk on purchasing a lot of virtual component licenses. With such an affected mind, he got straight to work at designing a colorful mech that embodied extreme joy and passion. These all happened to be the same emotions the event Snake felt when he performed at his best. Faze formed a bold idea. The alignment of the emotions expressed by the designer, mech and pilot determined whether they could produce the X Factor. Almost every speculation about the X Factor Faze had read on the galactic net only focused on the mech and its pilot. It almost never included the designer. Even if they did, they focused on the designer's physical objectives, not his emotional demands. How can a sword in the hands of a warrior shine bright when the blacksmith forged it casually? There was no proof for Faze's assertion that the craftsman mattered. As far as humanity knew, emotions weren't bundles of energy that had a definable existence in the material universe. It certainly sounded highly unlikely that when Faze designed and fabricated the Seraphim, he somehow embedded it with some sort of voodoo mental energy. No, perhaps the mystery lay in purpose and intent. The strong emotions of the mech designer sharpened his intent. A mech designed to break through fortifications would not only possess the physical qualities that enabled it to perform such a task, it would also be built carrying the designer's intent to succeed. Paired with a pilot who carries the same wish, such a mech crystallized the intent of all three entities in a single machine. In order to gift the new Nero with a purpose, Faze first had to look back on the intent of its base model. The Caesar Augustus is a product of a young, spoiled mech designer's desire to show off. Faze concluded as he recalled the debut of Jason Kozlowski. At the time, it was built to be the best all-rounder current-gen mech. Jason obviously hadn't been modest in his demands. However, he possessed one thing many other mech designers lacked. He was incredibly passionate when he designed the Caesar Augustus. The heir to National Aeromotives made a bet that he'd produce the design in a month. If Jason spent only 1 month to come up with a completely original design with so much pressure hanging over him, the emotions that he carried over in his creations would be immense. I've done a disservice to the Caesar Augustus. Faze realized as he recalled the times when he fabricated the virtual versions of the stock model and the Nero. Even though he crafted them in a simulation, the lifelike circumstances meant that the frustrations and difficulties he felt must have bled over to his end products. I need to adjust my mood. Redesigning the new Nero without emulating Jason's passion will just deliver another half-assed result. Faze felt as if he was forced to go up to a stage and begin acting while he had zero experience. The only thing he could do is recall the times when he was still young and bright before his moody teenage years set in. He used to dream of following in his father's footsteps and become a mech pilot. I was naive back then. Naive but happy. Much like how Jason felt 30 years ago when he just graduated from Estellan. While he didn't succeed in summoning up a youthful and arrogant mood, Faze somewhat managed to instill confidence in himself. I don't have anything great to draw upon in my past, but with the help of the system I can still dream of the wonders I'll experience in the future. The Caesar Augustus' main attribute was exuding absolute confidence. Jason believed the mech he designed was the best of the current generation. It surpassed any frontline or elite mech within the same technological boundary. Only the most advanced next-gen models carefully developed and kept hidden by the first-tier states could beat it in a fair fight, and those mechs were usually kept hidden from the public, employed only in the most frigid battles by the geniuses of the largest empires. In other words, the Caesar Augustus had reason to be arrogant. After matching his confident mood with the arrogant and narcissistic mindset behind the Caesar Augustus, Vase went to work making adjustments to the Nero. Naturally, in the perspective of improving the Nero's physical capabilities, he only had limited options. He hadn't learned any new sub-skills since the time he designed the Nero, after all. He also couldn't undo all of his work in the misguided intention to emulate Jason. Instead, he sought to bring back the charm of the base model. Vase had originally smoothed out the minute incongruities Jason incorporated in CA1 armor. He used to regard them as sloppy flourishes that added nothing of value. Now he noted the seemingly useless contours enhanced its domineering image. Next, he paid attention to its internals. The changes he made to produce the original Nero were minor optimizations. They reduced the risk of catastrophic faults and made the mech easier to maintain, but the underlying idea behind the changes was that he made the mech more timid. Jason designed the CA1 to be a show-stopping elite, focusing purely on its martial prowess and not nearly enough attention to its practicality. Vase somehow had to reconcile two opposite intents. One was the need to make the Nero more practical to maintain and repair. The other was to retain the Caesar Augustus' aggressive edge. The way Vase decided to go about it was to revert a couple of changes and implement a couple of new ones. The Caesar Augustus emphasized confidence to the point of recklessness. The Nero emphasized self-preservation to the point of timidity. Therefore, the Nero Redavidu should be focused on competence that its systems could take a better beating. Essentially, Vase left out much of the arrogance embedded in the base model. Since he hadn't made any major changes, Vase finished updating his Nero after only half a day. After Vase added in the finishing touches, he let the system evaluate his redesigned variant. He aptly named it the Nero Redavivis, after a somewhat dubious legend that the ancient Roman emperor rose from the dead. Vase imagined he succeeded in bringing his older work back to life. Design evaluation, CA1B Nero Redavivis. Variant name, CA1B Nero Redavivis. Base model, Caesar Augustus CA1. Original manufacturer, National Aeromotives. Weight classification, medium-heavy. Recommended role, Elite Vanguard. Armor, A. Carrying capacity, C-. Aesthetics, B. Endurance, D. Energy efficiency, D+. Flexibility, E. Firepower, B+. Integrity, E. Mobility, D+. Spotting, C-. X factor, E-. Deviance, 4%. Performance improvement, 3%. Overall evaluation, a customized design that barely improves on the original. While it is slightly easier to fabricate and repair, this variant offers barely any benefits. Rare among other variants, this design has not butchered the base model's X factor. Instead, it has retained a shadow of its presence. You have received 50 design points completing an original design of a last-generation mech. You have received 100 design points for designing a mech with a trace of X factor. Yes. I did just enough to get it to work. Vase rejoiced, happy for reaching the finish line just as he put in so much work. The windfall of DP he received also helped. At least Vase received some indication from the system that his attempts to recreate the vaunted X factor succeeded. I haven't wasted all of my time. Vase waited for a moment, but nothing else had happened. System? I've completed the mission. Won't you give me the rewards? Please continue fabricating your design in order to complete the mission. Regardless of the Nero Redavivis inadequacies, it offered the possibility to unleash the X factor, but evidently the possibility wasn't enough. He had to prove its existence by making the design come to life. I'm pretty sure the mission stated that designing a mech should be enough. Do you just want me to finish what I started? It didn't hurt to practice. I might as well do it. But first, let's spend my DP. Enough time had passed for his Fantasia variants to sell several hundred times, though their sales trend started to decline. And while Vase only managed to sell the Caesar Augustus and the Nero once, their higher tiers resulted in more DP when they were sold. Together with the DP he received as a reward for designing the Nero Redavidu, Vase saved enough points to purchase the medium-weight armor optimization I sub-skill in the skill tree. I'd rather purchase the 3D printer proficiency 2 upgrade since I still have trouble reproducing the Caesar Augustus parts, but I really need to learn how to work with armor once I receive the new license. It was a matter of priorities. Without becoming more proficient in modifying armor, he might fail in adapting the new armor to the Caesar Augustus. He'd be wasting the valuable license if he botched the design. He checked his status again to see if anything else had changed. Status. Name, Vase Larkinson. Profession, novice mech designer. Specializations, none. Design points, 74. Attributes. Strength, 0.7. Dexterity, 0.7. Endurance, 0.6. Intelligence, 1.2. Creativity, 1. Concentration, 1.1. Neural aptitude, F. Skills. Assembly, novice minus 3D printer proficiency 1, assembler proficiency 1. Business, apprentice. Computer science, incompetent. Electrical engineering, novice. Mathematics, incompetent. Mechanics, apprentice minus jury rigging 1, speed tuning 1. Metallurgy, apprentice. Metaphysics, incompetent. Physics, novice minus lightweight armor optimization 1, medium weight armor optimization 1. Evaluation, achieved a step into novice territory. Surprisingly, he gained some benefits from his focused research. The long hours he spent reading and watching interviews rose his concentration by 0.1 points. The scattered but varied theories he learned and formulated by himself also gained acknowledgement by the system, resulting in a new sub-skill called metaphysics. Seems like you acknowledge that metaphysics has merit. Vase remarked coyly at the system. It didn't deign to reply. Shrugging, Vase switched back to his skill tree and saw that the metaphysics sub-trees were under a special condition. He spotted plenty of icons, but fog shrouded their names and descriptions. He also couldn't spend his DP to unlock them. He wasn't allowed to cheat his way into mastering the X factor. This only underscored its value. Well, he could figure it out later. First he had to fabricate the Nero Rita video in order to prove his assumptions and complete the mission. First, I need to get in the right mindset again. I can't treat the fabrication process as a chore. He began work on fabricating the new Nero whilst keeping a confident, trusting attitude. This wasn't always easy to keep up for hours. Vase frequently took breaks in order to keep his mood fresh. This caused him to take twice as long to finish the Nero Rita video, but when he finally read through the testing and diagnostics of the completed model, he gained a pleasant surprise. Despite his fumbling, the Nero Rita video had actually improved. Its construction went a little smoother, causing less substandard parts to pop up. This improvement helped along the assembly process, where Faye spent much less time wrangling ill-fitting parts into a hole. I'm finally done with this. Vase sighed. He visited his store page, removed the first Nero from his catalog, and added in the Nero Rita video to take its place. The system finally gave Faze what he deserved. Congratulations for completing the mission. The road to understanding the X Factor is long and bumpy. There are many destinations at the end of the road. Believe in yourself and advance towards the end point unique to you. You have received a 10-year random medium armor production license lottery ticket. Please visit the lottery page to redeem your ticket. You have received a 200-ton medium armor raw materials package. Please visit your inventory to open the package. Faze was already filled with glee. My luck's been bad lately. The heavens must surely compensate me this time. Hopefully I won't encounter another pagoda. Faze waited for a long time to receive an armor production license. The good ones cost at least as much as an advanced mech license, but even bargain bin armor cost a pretty penny. Demanding a 100 million bright credits to license a decent armor system was considered reasonable. Of course, if Faze was really desperate, he could license outdated armor or even stuff that was so old, its owners didn't even bother charging a license for its use. The latter was useful if Faze made a civilian mech, such as a machine designed to lift containers in warehouses or sow crops in a farm. There was no way he'd ever implement such rotten armor in a combat mech. Any pilot that chose to bring such a poorly armored mech to the battlefield was asking to be sniped in a single shot. Over the 400-year development cycle of mechs, the components that accompanied their designs also evolved over time. Lasers got more efficient, enabling them to deal more damage with less heat. Ballistic weaponry featured new iterations of propellants and explosives. Energy cells provided more energy to the mech with the implementation of highly energetic fuels and advanced batteries. In the face of progressing weapons, a mech's armor had to match their pace. There were certain moments in mech history where firepower dominated over that period's armor level. Those were miserable times, where wars caused immense casualties to all the parties involved. In other times when armor easily endured against stagnating weapons, conflicts often dragged on into exhausting wars of attrition, draining much more resources than anticipated. Only when the level of firepower matched the level of armor could mech battles remain short and limited. More wars started during this period, but they also ended quicker. Hopefully the lottery will bring me something average. Vase had no desire to win another good license. The Caesar Augustus was already bad enough. He did not want to compound his expenses with some kind of super deluxe armor plating that required special machinery to produce. When the Wheel of Fortune showed up, Vase let out a relieved breath. At least it's not the FC King Pagoda again. The only thing Vase had to worry about was getting an awfully cheap armor license. The Caesar Augustus required a certain standard of armor to work. Anything older than last generation was useless in the battlefield. Even certain newer alloys might not work if they aimed at the bottom segment of the market. Wish me luck, Lucky. His gem cat meowed disinterestedly, not even deigning to glance at the holographic prize wheel. Despite his name, Lucky hadn't helped Vase gather much luck so far. He still had his uses though, so Vase just ruffled his cat's head and spun the wheel. Clacking sounds echoed in the workshop as the wheel's pins clacked against the pointer. Various different plates of armor spun past too quickly for Vase to recognize their names. After about 30 seconds of solid spinning, the wheel slowed down. Vase was able to read the labels now, but he failed to recognize their brands. Way too many products are introduced each year. The names don't really matter. I only care about their capabilities. The wheel dragged its heels for a couple of suspenseful seconds before it stopped. The pointer landed on a grayish piece of plate. Congratulations. You have received a 10-year production license of the following armor component. Marlin Solutions 1004 HRF 5th generation. It looks a little cheap. All Vase had to say, it could be worse. As he studied the armor specifications and sought more information on the galactic net, he realized his bad luck struck again. At least he hadn't suffered critical damage. The 1004 HRF was actually a bog-standard piece of armor. It was also popular, seeing as Marlin opted to renew its formula for 5 generations. A favorite of small and medium-sized mech manufacturers, the HRF required a complicated manufacturing process to produce decent quality armor plating. Decent quality for average second-line mechs, like law enforcement or planetary guard regiments. The 5th generation of the HRF thankfully qualified as current generation armor, so its fundamental specs weren't inferior to the mechs his cousin Melinda piloted at the Bentheim Planetary Guard. The HRF's performance actually featured no unique strong points. Neither did it have any glaring weaknesses. Its main advantage was cost. Its formula used no exotic raw materials, just a large amount of widely available minerals and ingots. The HR in its name stood for highly refined, which meant it took a lot of energy to extract the useful parts of all those materials and combine them into a single plate. Thus, the production of the armor generated a lot of waste products. Vase comm unit pinged with the arrival of a new message. Just like with the Caesar Augustus, one of the system's shell companies sent him the production license for the HRF via the galactic net. After combing over the license agreement and finding nothing amiss, he signed it and sent it back to the fake institute. The system would take care of the rest of the paperwork, like registering his license at Marlin Solutions and the local branch of the Mech Trade Association. He unpacked his virtual box of raw materials next. A huge set of containers got dumped in Faye's storage area, practically filling it up halfway. Opening them to take a look inside revealed neat boxes filled with ingots, minerals and powders. Damn. 200 tons should be enough for a couple of mechs with plenty to spare if I had any other armor license. But the HRF wastes so much input that I'm not even certain I can produce enough plates for 2 mechs. If Vase bought the 200 tons from the open market, he'd have to cough up almost 20 million bright credits. Processing them into finished plates of armor used up a lot of energy and a fair amount of time, so Vase also needed to pay tens of thousands of credits in his next electricity bill. This was also why he appreciated the system's rewards for this mission. The materials gifted to him saved an enormous amount of trouble. For most mechs, armor plating cost the most due to its excessively high material needs. Other components such as the power reactor and engines demanded a lot of precision in its manufacturing, but asked a lot less of its materials. Their main value lay in their sophisticated architecture, which fell under intellectual property that the license already covered. Vase had checked the price of a 10-year Caesar Augustus production license shortly after he first got it. Such prices weren't made public, so he had to visit a couple of mech fan sites to find a couple of estimates. The license's price supposedly ranged from 500 million to up to 2 billion bright credits. Jason stuffed his mech full with goodies from different companies. It's no wonder they all want a piece of the pie when he licenses out his mech. That was the way business worked. It was extremely fortunate that Vase had earned the licenses through the system. If he had to resort to other means, he might have been forced to sign away his independence. For example, a competing manufacturer might lend his leftover licenses if Vase sold a majority stake of his company's stock. To any other mech designer, they'd feel fortunate if someone decides to invest in their startups. To someone who has the system like Vase, it'd be satisfying thirst by drinking poison. He refused to be shackled by anyone. With only about 4 weeks left until the start of the Young Tigers exhibition, Vase wanted to complete a viable design that he could show off to the elites attending the event. The manufacture and sale of any model based on the Caesar Augustus was still too difficult for Vase to achieve by himself in the limited time before he had to meet his interest payment. Even though the base model could still compete with current-gen models, the Caesar Augustus only had a very small circle of customers. It was not viable to produce the mech first and put out a few ads on the galactic net to sell later. It might take years for some random pilot looking to buy a cheap elite mech to stumble upon his work. By then he'd already be bankrupt. It's better to seek out a customer first. I won't be wasting the remaining half-month I have left. I don't want to do a fruitless job manufacturing a mech I'll never earn anything from its sale. Hopefully a lot of wealthy people will visit this year's it. Anyway, let's not put the cart before the horse. I need to get to work with the new design. Vase loaded the Mech Designer System's exclusive designer and looked at his available models. He considered iterating on the Nero Redavidoo, which would save him a lot of time, or start over from the base model. Both choices had their pros and cons. While I'm rather short on time, 4 weeks should still be plenty. What's more important is that I start designing a variant with the X factor in mind from the beginning. If I keep working on the Nero, I'll just muddle it further by blending in different emotions and intents. He'd certainly be able to design a decent mech, just not one with a strong X factor. The X factor doesn't matter very much if I'm designing a mass production model. But if I want to sell something based off the Caesar Augustus, I need to tailor it to an elite who treasures his mech as a partner. I absolutely can't be casual about this point. With the base model loaded, Vase wasn't in a hurry to fiddle around. According to his self-made theory about actualizing the X factor, the intents of the designer, mech and pilot had to align. This sounded simple, but Vase wasn't designing an original mech. Instead, he adapted from another designer's existing work. What really happens to the X factor if a mech has multiple designers? The Nero Redavidoo showed that the X factor hadn't disappeared from the base model, unlike with the first edition of the Nero. This meant that if the intents and emotions of the two designers overlapped, the X factor would be preserved. This fit in with his theory. But what if he had an opposite intent from the original designer? Say Designer 1 has developed a mech design that emphasizes defense. Designer 2 comes along and makes a variant of the design that focuses heavily on offense. Would the opposing intents neutralize themselves, or would Designer 2's intentions overwrite Designer 1's original imprint? The truth might be a mix of the two, where Designer 2's intent becomes predominant but in a diluted form. I don't have enough time to experiment with intents. Vase chose to keep his intent simple, one that did not clash with the base model. I want a mech that retains its dominance. Though it's too outdated to become a mainstay in a modern battlefield, it can still rule over civilian and mercenary mechs. A warhorse. An aggressive mech that needs to perform at its best when the pilot needed to show off his prowess. It didn't need to stick around in extended engagements and try to outlast the enemy. It preferred to break through and smash any obstacles in its way. He already had a name in mind for his new variant. The Mark Antony. A rogue and a bastard, he nonetheless served as a daring cavalry commander under some dude called Julius Caesar. He later became rivals with the guy who eventually got called Caesar Augustus, and died because he wasn't as competent. Sucks to be you, but I got to thank you for providing a fitting story to your name. Mark Antony's history paralleled with how Vase envisioned his mech both in its role and its relation to the base model. The Mark Antony would be a cheaper and less armored version of the Caesar Augustus. It should retain or even expand on the aggressive arrogance of its base model in order to prevent its opponents from exploiting its weaknesses. Now that Vase formed a strong image of his future design's purpose, he could finally begin working for real this time. Let's start with the armor. It's the biggest job by far, and I need to replace the original model's armor wholesale. This is going to take a while. Like and subscribe.